All righty. Well, hello, everybody. And thank you so much for taking some time to come out and to spend this hour together virtually discussing this veganish eating topic. I'm really excited to be here with you. Before we pop in really quickly, I just want to thank all of those that have come together to make this possible. If you've been participating in other events with the East Baton Rouge Parish Library, you know that they are just the bomb. They do so much as far as community education, engagement, connection, and I'm thankful very much for this opportunity. We also do want to acknowledge Healthy BR, who is also a collaborating co-sponsor of this event, as well as the All of Us Research Program, which is an initiative through the Institutes of Health. I'll talk a little bit about them at the end as well, but they're basically a program that is looking to advance precision medicine, to advance medical breakthroughs through precision medicine, where protocols, preventative measures, treatments, things of that sort are individualized to the person. And it's a far-reaching program, and they do a great deal of outreach into the community to just advance health. So we thank them also for their support in this particular activity. So I see as people are coming in, I would like to get an idea of who is here. And although this is virtual and I can't see you all, I can see your comments. And so I would really like for this to be interactive. So if you can find where that chat is, and if you can go on ahead and get ready to utilize it in answering some questions, we'll do a slight little pre-test at the beginning. But also, as was mentioned earlier, if you have questions as we're going on, there is a question period at the end that I've allotted time for, but I will also take them as we go along, because bottom line is I want to make sure that the information is clear, not only clear and understandable, but also actionable, so that if something does resonate with you and you think it can be beneficial to your health or the health of your family, that you're able to put it in place. So let's just warm up really quickly. And let's start by just letting me get an idea of how many of you are plant-based in your eating in any way, shape, form, or fashion. So are you vegan, vegetarian, any of those varieties? If so, say yes, and if not, say no. So let's see what those are doing in the comments. And can you see them? Jessica, anything popping up?
Yes, everyone is reacting. Yes, no, no, not really. My daughter is vegan. Does that count?
Okay, great. Okay, so is it about a half and a half mixture or something like that? I'm not able to see the comments. Let me pull it up so that I can.
So it looks like
Now I
there's
can.
more no's than yeses, but
Okay,
I see
great.
some not yets and working on it.
All right, all right. Well, that's good, because that's what we're going to talk about today. And we'll also talk about the fact that I am not going to, this is not a workshop encouraging people to be straight vegan. That's why it's called Veganish. And we'll get into that when we get into the definition. So thank you all for sharing. And I see where we are. Just a little bit about me. My name is Nettye Johnson. I've lived down in Louisiana for probably 30 years or so. I'm originally from Chicago. And right now I live in Denham Springs. We've been out here for about 10 years, and I'm a mama to two. I'm married, and I'm a two-time author. I also have a podcast, and I basically run an organization called Education for Transformation. And we are a wellness organization that just puts out information, education, programming, the like, to help people to find balance and live well. So I'll share a little bit more if you want to connect further to take a look at some of the other offerings that we have. But one of the things that I am really excited about is that the East Baton Rouge Parish Library so graciously has both of the books that I've authored so far that are health resources around healthy nutrition. So we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit more on. But what I want to do first is I want to get us rolling with a pre-test. So we have some people that are vegetarian and plant-based. That's awesome. Some not really, some people that are getting in there. So let's see where we are. So these are true, false questions. And I want you to just go on ahead and answer it just off the top of your head and put in a yes or true or false in the chat. We ready? Okay, so let's go. Here's the first one. Vegan eating is the healthiest way to eat. Actually, I gave you a third option there. So in the chat, and I can actually see it now, I want you to go on ahead and say this is true, false, or I don't know. Oh, I love it. You guys are responding. Okay. And it's a mixture. I see some truths. What are you saying? What are you saying, Jeff?
I'm seeing some falses. I see a few I don't knows, truths. It's about half and half.
Okay, great. Okay, great. And I actually will give the responses to these after we do it. It's a really short pre-test. There are only 3. Okay. And let's go to the next one. So thank you all for responding. Here's the next question. Alrighty. Available substitutes make vegan eating very easy. Listen at this specific example. So if I want to make Jiffy cornbread, I wish I could see y'all's faces or raise hands if y'all eat Jiffy. I didn't eat Jiffy until I moved down here. It was not very popular up when I moved up north. And when I moved down here and had it for the first time, I was like, this is not cornbread. This is corn cake. Jiffy is some kind of good. It's like semi dessert to me. But at any rate, I digress. So to make vegan Jiffy cornbread, instead of putting in egg and milk, which it asks you to do when you when you follow the directions, if I want to make it vegan, all I have to do is use an egg substitute and a plant-based milk substitute, which is readily available. Is that true? Okay, so let's see. True, 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 true. I don't know. I'm getting a lot of T's. Don't knows. Okay. All right, fantastic. Okay, so this is an easy test so far, right? Everybody says true. I got 1 false. Okay, here we go. Here's the last one. The plant-based Impossible Burger. I don't know if you all have had that before. They have it at Burger King. A lot of restaurants use it. You can actually buy the burgers in the store now. It took a long time before that would happen. So the plant-based Impossible Burger is healthier than a beef burger. Is that true, false, or I don't know? Okay, so what are we seeing? All of these are truths. I see 1 false, and I see an I don't know. Okay, well, what do you think? You're on mic, Jessica. So what do you think the answers are to these 3 questions that we did?
Oh,
I'm gonna go back.
School. I did not go to nutrition school. I would guess true. I would guess true. Let's see.
Okay. All right. So here's where we are. I love the answers because a lot of these answers are somewhat like it depends, right? And I deliberately did it this way because I wanted to, first of all, get us thinking a little bit, because what tends to happen is when we get a new way, not a new, but when a particular mode of eating starts to become popular and get traction, we hear a lot about the positive benefits. And I'm definitely a fan of plant-based eating. So I'm going to share some of those health benefits and like that with you today. Well, what tends to happen is we tend to like take it all at once and then just assume that if this part is good, then everything is good. And whenever you have a type of eating that excludes an entire food group, there are some ways that we have to look at it to make sure that the move that was made, if it was made for health reasons, it stays healthy. So let me give you an example. Going back to number 1, vegan eating is the healthiest way to eat. It depends. Because y'all, French fries are vegan. Oreos are vegan, right? There are a lot of vegan foods that are not necessarily healthy. And sometimes you can go to vegan restaurants and they will have taken some vegetables and deep fried them, put them in a batter and deep fried them, and then put them in a bun with a bunch of at that point, it's not really more healthy than if you were to have a lean piece of meat and perhaps a grain. Does that make sense? If we're still taking these vegetables and we're adding a lot of salt, sugar, and fat, which a lot of times is done, is it necessarily healthy? It really depends. So that's kind of a depends. You can eat vegan and still not reap the benefits that are possible with eating more plant-based if it's not done with wisdom. I'll also talk about some caveats with vegan eating as far as making sure that you're getting enough protein, omega-3 fats, and things like that as well, that you have to be aware of when you take out an entire food group. So let's take a look at this second question. available substitutes. So this is something that I did when I first made a switch over into eating plant-based. And it took me a while to realize if you were to take some Jiffy cornbread and just swap out the milk for milk, like almond milk, and take the eggs and use like a flax egg or some, a container of egg substitutes, it still would not be vegan because Jiffy is made with lard. Jiffy mix contains animal lard, right? So even though you're swapping out the egg, you're still getting animal lard fat because it is in the package. Now, some people may say, well, that doesn't really matter to me as much. But when we talk about what veganism is extremely it's restrictive. And so what actually happens is a lot of times people that say that they're vegan, they're actually kind of veganish if they're not being very cautious about what kinds of ways animal products are getting into their foods. So let's do one more. One more example, and this is the plant-based Impossible Burger. I mentioned that that's in Burger King. Is it more healthy than a beef burger? Not necessarily. I'm going to actually show you the nutrition information and the ingredients list for the Impossible Burger. And if you have ever had one before, can somebody pop in the chat, like just like a yes, if you have had one before? Really quickly, I want to see, have you all had it? Anybody had one of those before? Now, tell me, it tastes just like beef, doesn't it? Like literally, people can't sometimes, maybe you say you can tell, but it is so close to beef. Y'all, they had to do some stuff to make plants taste like beef, and it is highly processed. So much so that when they had the first iteration of it, registered dietitians were having near fits about the amount of saturated fat, the amount of sodium, the things that they did to these beautiful vegetables to make it taste like beef. But when they advertise it, they say vegan. And so people assume that it's just so great, but you really could have had, and for the cost too, it's very expensive. For the cost, a person could have had a high quality, lean ground beef burger and have come across in a better overall nutrition package. So veganism has wonderful, and veganish eating, plant-based eating has a lot of great benefits, but we have to just do it like anything with a bit of awareness. I see somebody said that the Gardein products are A game, the bomb. You are correct. There are some products that are much better than others. And one of the things that we'll talk about a little bit later is whenever you're looking at food products, whether it has to do with plant-based, vegetarian, veganism, anything, what is on the front of the package, y'all? That is advertising and marketing. The truth of it is on the back. Flip that bad boy over and look at the ingredients list and look at the nutrition. Look at the amount of sodium, the amount of added sugars, the amount of fat, and look at the ingredients list. And sometimes the ingredients list for some of these vegan products that people that are marketed to feel so much more natural and healthy, sometimes they're like a chemical experiment to try to make it taste like meat. So you're so right. Gardein is one of the products that tends to have a more clean ingredient list and a more healthy nutritional package. Will I teach you how to make a good burger? Not in this particular workshop. I can point you to some resources and some cookbooks to make delicious burgers, but I can mention some that you can buy. It's a good bit that I'll mention some of my favorite brands that are somewhat healthy. Y'all keep the questions coming. Alrighty, so let's go on ahead and take a look at what we're going to talk about today. Today, we're going to define what I call veganish eating. Now, I didn't make up this term. I just kind of adopted it, and I'll tell you what it means to me. It's not an official word, but I'll tell you what it means to me. And I'll also talk about what are some of the benefits of veganish, some of the considerations that we want to take in mind, and what are some transitioning tips that you might want to consider. Because what you'll see from this workshop is that veganism it has its benefits, but it's not a fit for everyone, right? But everybody can be veganish. Not everybody can or necessarily should be vegan, but veganish, which means plant forward, having more plants in your eating and your diet. Almost everybody can do that. And if you do it with wisdom, it can be a very healthy way of eating for anyone that chooses to kind of add more plants into their diet, which is what we've all been recommended to do from USDA guidelines. So before we do that, let's go ahead and break down what is veganism, veganish. But before we get that, let's talk about the different types of plant-based diets. Now, if you happen to get the email that was that's graciously sent out to you, you have a copy in your handout of this. It's just laid out a little bit differently. Otherwise, you can go ahead and just snap a picture of the screen if you would like to get this breakdown. But basically, we see that there's kind of a spectrum, y'all. There's a spectrum of eating, and I would like to start the spectrum not on plant-based side. Let's kind of expand it out. We have some types of modes of eating that are very meat heavy, right? Paleo is extremely meat heavy, and it pulls out a lot of plant-based types foods, particularly like legumes and grains and that kind of sort of thing. So we have an extreme one on plant-based and that is meat-based or meat-oriented. And then on the other side, we have veganism that is primarily plant-based. What most people in the United States eat is what we call the standard American diet. And y'all, the acronym for that is SAD, SAD. And registered dietitians, they call it that. It is typically overly meatyful. Not that meat is a bad thing, but the proportions of meat are much larger than what we should. You know, registered dietitians say that typically a serving of meat should be around the size of your palm. Think about when you go to a standard restaurant. I like to use Piccadilly as an example, not smashing them in any way. Their vegetable plate is actually quite lovely. But if you go there, and I like to use them as an example because they're a cafeteria type item, when you pick your meat portion is this big, and then the vegetables are in these itty bitty little trays, and you put a couple of little vegetables there. And oftentimes the vegetables have been prepared with additional meat, right? Okay, so that's a meat side of the spectrum. Let's come on to the other side of the spectrum where we have plant-based. On the plant-based spectrum extreme, we have veganism. Vegans do not eat any animals or any animal byproducts. That is the thing that I think that causes a lot of people that say that they're vegan. If you really are not being careful, you're actually veganish. So for example, no animal broths. Let's say that I am eating a nice soup, right? And the soup is a minestrone and it has all of these vegetables in it. But if it was cooked with chicken broth, that's not going to be a vegan dish. It's vegetarian because of the chicken broth. If I am eating a pastry and it has honey in it, that's not vegan anymore because honey comes from bees. A lot of times they use gelatin and lecithins, sometimes stabilizers that are placed inside packaged food or food that is prepared, manufactured that you buy, will have animal byproducts in it, and we may not be aware of it. If someone is being vegan by a strict sense, they're really cautious about what they are eating and what it's made with because they're trying to take all of those animal products out of it. So coming in a little bit more, let's come in on the spectrum. Next, we have what we're called Lacto-Ovo Vegetarianism. And y'all let me know in the comments if any of you all are familiar with any of these terms. I am actually a Lacto-Ovo vegetarian that happens to eat vegan a couple of days a week by accident, because those are days when I just don't happen to have eggs or milk. But I try not to, I don't eat animal byproducts like broth or anything where an animal had to die. Like I say, my food did not have a mother. However, I do eat eggs, and that's a personal choice for me because I find that egg substitutes don't perform as well for me, and I like the protein and the whole nutrition that I get from egg products. But everyone is a personal decision. And I don't drink milk, but I eat cheese because, again, personally, I think cheese is a gift, like a gift from heavens. I adore cheese. So a lacto-ovo vegetarian will do dairy and eggs, right? But they still might not necessarily do gelatins, animal broths, those kinds of things. I do honey as well. Look at pescatarianism. A lot of, Carol says, me too. Okay, me too. Tell me more, Carol, about what specifically you're referring to. Pescatarians, they don't eat red meat. They might not eat the chicken. Yeah, cheese is a gift. I'm with you. They don't eat the poultry or fowl, but they will eat seafood. So fish, shrimp, oysters, all of these things that are so prominent down here in this area. They will eat that, but they leave, land animals alone. And sometimes they will also eat eggs and dairy. Some people find that pescatarianism, some RDs will often recommend that as an option because it does give you access to great protein sources in seafood. And it also is going to give you some fatty acids and things like that that are very prominent in seafood that vegetarians or vegans have to work a little bit harder to make sure that you're getting them into their diet. And then there's another one called a politarian. Now, politarians, they skip the seafood, but they're going to tear up some chicken. They'll eat some chicken and turkey. They eat the fowl, the birds. So literally, you notice that there are a lot of different variations here. One of the things that I really do like to focus on when I'm talking about plant-based eating and what I call veganish eating is not as much focusing on what you don't eat. That is a choice for whatever reason that you want to do, right? But it is to focus on what you are eating. Because remember when I talked a little bit earlier about how the standard American diet, it's meat-based. Think about it. If we were to ask you, what did you have for dinner on Saturday? We would start with what was the meat. I had pork chops, or I had chicken, or usually the meat is what, but when that is restricted or removed, it opens up our ideas, it opens up room on our plate, it opens up our palate to add more plants. So just right off of the bat for where we are right now, there was a Gallup poll that was done in 2019, and they found that at that particular time, 5% of adults in the US self-report being vegetarian. So that can be anywhere along the lines because vegans are also vegetarian as well. And they found that the younger that people were, the more higher it was. It got up to like 7, maybe 10%. Older Americans, not so much. So does any of these sound like they may work for you? Like, okay, well, I'm going to eat some chicken, or you may still want to have your red meat and your pork as well. But you can see yourself adding more vegetables in. Just go on ahead and put a me in if you can see any of those. Or if any of these are areas where you already eat, I'd love to see where you fall on this plant-based eating spectrum. Okay, I want to add more vegetables. That's what we're going to talk about today. I love seeing that. Thank you for putting that into the comments. So let's go on ahead and make this really simple. How do I define veganish? And again, y'all, this is something that it's not a word I invented, but I kind of just made it my own. I simply define veganish eating as a primarily plant-based diet. Instead of necessarily being plant exclusive, which is vegan, you're only eating plant-based foods. So that's going to be fruits, vegetables, nuts, grains, seeds, right? That's vegan. No other about veganish is saying those things are the stars on my plate. And whether I choose to add eggs or that cheese or any kind of a meat, those are the side players. It's flipping what we typically do in the standard American diet. And if you look at the USDA recommendations for how we are to eat at the My Plate, the bulk of the plate that they recommend is going to be plant-based with a smaller portion of meat for those that choose to eat it. So that's kind of what it is. For me, as I mentioned, I'm a Lacto-Ovo vegetarian and I'm vegan a couple of days a week, and I don't even think about the terms. It's just, this is where I settled with my eating. But I also consider my family veganish, and they had fried chicken the other day, right? But we have a lot more vegetables on our plates. Even when I cook for them, there's a ton more vegetables, fruits, grains, nuts, that kind of more natural food. And we're going to talk about some of the health benefits that are why. Jessica, are you saying anything in the comments that you'd like for me to comment on why before we go into some of the benefits?
No, it looks like it's everybody was kind of commenting on their personal styles of eating.
Okay.
A lot are commenting that they want to add more veggies. So this is great.
Fantastic. Let's talk about, before we get to how, let's talk about some of the whys. Okay, I love it. And I love this. Okay, so let's talk about some of the whys. First of all, our bodies are designed to eat more plants than meat, flat out. They just are. If you consider, we can see it for those of you that follow the biblical basis. When that creation story shows us that mankind was basically vegetarian in the beginning. They didn't really start eating animals until after the flood. And there's even an account in the Bible in Daniel chapter 1 and Daniel chapter 10 where there was this test. Daniel asked to be given this test to say, just give me vegetables and water for 10 days, and I'll bet you I'll be more healthy than the folks that are eating all that other stuff. And that is the basis of the Daniel fast. Some of you may be familiar of the Daniel fast, where you pull away from animal products and things like, refined sweets and things like that, and it can greatly improve your health. Our bodies naturally respond from that. So even if you're not looking at the biblical basis, look at it from a biological standpoint, and we can see how this bears out. So let's think about carnivores, primarily meat-eating organisms, animals, and include us, and then compare it to us. So if we think about it, consider first of all our teeth, right? Okay, if we still have, we're supposed to have 32 teeth. Some of us maybe not that many anymore, but of the 32, 8 are incisors, 4 are canines. They're just 4 canines, and then the rest are molars, right? Canines are tearing teeth, right? Animals that eat animal products, they have tearing teeth. It needs to tear things. Animals that eat primarily plant-based have more grinding teeth. When we look at how even our mouth is set up, our mouth is set up to have more grinding, biting than tearing and ripping. Well, let's say, well, we don't just go and jump on an animal and eat. Let's go into and say that doesn't apply to us anymore because we're like, civilized. Think about our saliva. To break down meats requires a much more acidic type of saliva, as well as the acids that are in our stomach. Let's think about animals. Animals that eat meat, they usually don't even chew it up. They bite it, it's chomp, 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 it's swallowed whole. It goes down into their stomach that is highly acidic. The acid starts to break it down, and then it has a relatively short intestine to get that meat out of the body very quickly. It knows how to break it down and get the meat out so that the meat doesn't rot, right? And so animals that eat meat, their body, everything from their teeth to their saliva to their stomach acid to the length of their intestines to the fact that the intestines is smooth, it's not like bumpy. All of that supports eating a lot of meat. Now let's look at organisms that eat primarily plants. There's grinding more, there's more mastication or chewing that happens in the mouth. There's less acidity in our saliva and stomach acids. It's more alkaline, right? Because it's going to handle plant-based foods a little bit differently. There's a longer intestine, right? Our intestines are, I think it's like 10 times our height, whereas for animals that eat primarily plants, it's 3 to 4 times. So we have this long intestine that is actually more bumpy and curvy so that it has more time to break down and extract the nutrients from the food, the plant-based food. So watch what happens, y'all. When a body that is primarily designed to eat more plants than meat, when we flip it and we eat more meat than plants, we get all kinds of issues and backups. And I'm not going to be too graphic because I can't see your faces. Usually when I train this out, I can see how people are responding to kind of know how far I can go. But basically, we have some super long intestines that if we're eating primarily meat, our stomach has not broken it down sufficiently. It gets into our intestines that are designed to have a slower process because that's needed for plants. And meat and all kinds of stuff gets impacted and stuck up in there. Y'all, there have been estimates that the average American that follows that standard American meat-heavy diet, and they don't eat a lot of vegetables, fruits, or things that have fiber, a lot of water, those kinds of things, they say that there can be 5 to up to 20 pounds of undigested food in our bodies. Let's think about this. How many times have you heard people say, oh, well, to get your health straight, you need to do this detox. So we go and buy these teas or we take these herbs and all of this kind of stuff, because what we're trying to do is to help our body to get all of this stuff out, because we're putting things in at a ratio that our body isn't designed to hold. So then all of this weight comes off and we're like, whoa, I done lost 7 pounds in 3 days, and we go right back to eating the same way, and then it Does this make sense? Y'all tell me in the comments. Does any of this sound familiar?
This absolutely makes sense.
Yes, we are omnivores. However, what is our proportion of omnivoriatism? I just made that up. I know that's not how you say it. We go too far towards the meat and not enough towards the plant. And so what I am as a health educator, I always have to recommend what is the overall overarching standard guidelines, which is most of your plate, 2/3 to 3/4 should be plant-based. And if you're going to have meat, it should be the smaller amount because your body can handle it better. Okay, does that kind of make sense? Do you think SAD is heavy on meat because of the meat? Don't get me started. You're talking, oh, you are right on. Miss Cynthia talking about the meat industry lobbying. The same thing with dairy. When you look at the financial and the political aspects and follow it from a historical standpoint, there's some phenomenal books. I can recommend one called Salt, Sugar, Fat. Michael Pollan has a number of books as well. When you look at those intersections, you see how they have influence over how our diets have changed over the years. It has to do with how money is made, industries, lobbying. So, Ms. You are right on. It has a big part of it. And look at what's happening to our health. Look at what's happening to our health. The health of Americans over the past 20, 30 years has drastically declined. And a lot of it has to do with the changes in the way that we eat. Not only the meat heaviness of it, but also the processed nature. SAD, that stands for Standard American Diet. SAD is an acronym for Standard American Diet, which is typically very heavy on meat. It is also typically highly processed and has exorbitant amounts of salt, sugar, and fat added to it. And that's linked to the pharmaceutical companies. Come on now, you see, it is a cycle. And with knowledge and just a couple of changes, realizing and not realizing, because we know this, but remembering that food is literally a building block for our bodies. And when we just make different choices, make them enjoyable and sustainable, we can reap a lot of benefits. Let's go on ahead and take a look at some of the other benefits that we can get when we are eating in that proper alignment. Again, whether you choose to have meat or not, but when we are really focusing. So what I like to say with Veganish is it is plant forward. So I'm not bashing meat, but I'm saying we going in on the vegetables. Here's some of the things that we can look at. Vegetables are packets of just all kinds of micro and macronutrients, antioxidants, fiber, things that our bodies need. And y'all, here's another link that we see in America. And it is estimated that 2/3 of US adults are medically overweight or obese. And if we are not giving our bodies what our bodies need nutritionally, our bodies are wise. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. They know that they're not getting the nutrition, so it drives cravings. But we continue to feed ourselves with foods that don't give the nutrition. So what happens is we're overfed and undernourished. And here again is yet another cycle that continues and continues and continues. But when we give our bodies what it needs, as far as the nutrition that it is designed and that is here for us without messing it up by overprocessing, we can see a lot of benefits. We have increased immune health. Notice that when we came into this COVID condition and they were talking about things that we could do to boost our immunity and how often eating well even came up in that. It also has been found that there's some studies that show that when you eat a diet that is highly plant-based, and these are actually going into some that are exclusive plant, like not eating meats, there have been some markers that show that we can have reduced inflammation. And inflammation is a key to all kinds of health maladies, health issues, I'm going to use that word, that we can work around. Eating more fruits, vegetables, plants, nuts, and grains can also help with weight maintenance. We get more nutrition in a less caloric value. That term is actually called caloric density. And if you happen to look at a scoring mechanism called the ANDI index, it's ANDI, which stands for Aggregate Nutrient Density Index. It was created a couple of decades ago by Dr. Furman. And when you look at it, and it ranks foods from like 0 to 1,000, saying per calorie, how much nutrition are you getting in this? almost all of the first half are fruits, nuts, vegetables, and grains. You'll see some like seafood pop up in there, but across the top, it's these vegetables. You get so much nutrition in a smaller amount of calories. So when you're eating this, your body's getting what it needs. You typically get full. So it can help with weight maintenance, which is tied to 7 of the top 10 causes of death and disability in the United States. There have been some studies that also show, actually hundreds of them, that indicate or suggest that eating lots of fruits and vegetables can reduce the risk for a number of different types of cancer. Um, it's unbelievable. And again, we're not talking about absolutely no meat, but we're talking about doing exactly what so many of you all said, just adding more fruits and vegetables and plant-based items into your diet. The heart health data is astounding as well. The improvements that we can have in how our heart health is functioning, and particularly that's important because heart disease is the #1 cause of death in the United States. So we can have that. We've seen studies that show that people that eat more plant-based can tend to live longer. And then for some people, the environmental preservation aspect of eating more plants is extremely important. Again, going into industry, if you look at the data on how much natural resources go into creating 1 pound of beef versus how much you can actually, how many more people you can feed, how the land can be used to get like 1 pound of vegetables or even, far much more than that. It weighs out there. And then there are some people that are vegan because of their love for animals. They have that not wanting animals to be killed or something. There are a lot of different reasons that even go into those aspects as well. But even if you're just looking at some of these things, I ask you to look at what is your personal health status, or what are some of the health challenges that are prominent in your family tree? Are they tied to cancers or heart disease? Diabetes isn't listed on here, but that's another thing that can be greatly helped. Plant-based foods, particularly when they have high fiber, can tend to help you regulate your blood sugar better. Think about those particular conditions and how some small shifts, but consistent shifts in how you're eating by adding more plant-based foods may be able to help there. The How Not to Die book is phenomenal. Halima, yes, that is a wonderful. I hope you all are seeing what's going on in the chat and that you're taking down some notes and you're checking out some of these other resources that I'm sure are available at the EVR Public Library. All right, so let's keep on going. Arthritis, yes, the inflammation ties are very, very, as a matter of fact, if you go to the Arthritis Association's website, they actually have some articles talking about plant-based eating and inflammation and arthritis as well. Okay, so let's keep on going. Now let's start to talk about some of the challenges, right? Because remember when we started this off and we talked about plant-based eating, okay, it's not automatically necessarily better for you because again, whenever you take out an entire food group, registered dietitians will say you have to be a little bit cautious because there are positive things that we can get from animal products that are, prepared and maintained in a healthy way. And one of them is protein. Now, oh, thank you so much, Halima. I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm glad you liked it. Please do tell me in the comments which ones you liked. Now, how many of you have heard that vegetarians or veganism, if you just eat vegetables, you can't get protein, or it's just tough? Have you ever heard that? Let me know in the comments if you say yes or no. Whether it's true or not, have you ever heard that? Yeah, we did. I hear that quite a bit. Here's another thing that if you got the handout, I have I'm sorry, Annette. I was saying if you had heard or it said that people that eat plant-based don't get enough protein. That's a very common belief, and there is some truth in it. Think about it, if my diet, if my version, and I'm just going to use myself as an example, I struggled with my weight for the first 30 something years of my life. And literally didn't start to get a handle on it until like I hit 40. And so my standard diet would be like literally I would go work out. I've been exercising since I was about 20 something. I'm a marathoner and a running coach and stuff. So I would spend hours working out. Like I'm talking about hours. And then I would roll up to McDonald's and get a number 9 combo meal. Yeah. Or I would go to Popeyes back when that Popeyes was open, down on Florida. Remember that when they closed? I would go to Popeyes and I wouldn't get a 2-piece, I get a 3-piece. And then I get my sides. Okay, so if I'm taking that diet, right, and I pull out the meat, but I'm still eating the same other things. Being when I got that McDonald's number 9, it came with French fries. Well, that's vegetarian, it's vegan, but is it healthy? When you do that, you will have difficulties getting your protein in. But look at what we see on the screen, y'all. You can get significant amounts of protein in things that most people don't think about. For example, look at peas. A half a cup of peas can give you 4 grams. You may say, well, that doesn't sound like a lot, but peas are actually used a lot of times in protein powders. So sometimes, and they have other health benefits in there as well. Hemp seeds, just 3 tablespoons of hemp seeds can give you 10 grams. You can get a good bit from quinoa. Quinoa is it's actually a seed, but we treat it like a grain. It is a whole protein. You can use that instead of white rice. It actually has this slightly nutty flavor that I absolutely adore. Just adding in a little bit of that can get you some protein. And so what has to happen when you're doing plant-based eating and you're doing it for health reasons is you have to keep protein in mind and add little bits here and there and allow that to add up. For example, when I make a smoothie, I usually will throw in some oatmeal into my smoothie. It gives me that extra fiber boost. It gives me extra heart health. It makes it stick a little bit better. It actually gives it a little bit of a nutty flavor, but it also will add in some additional protein for you. So to your question, how much protein is recommended daily? It is going to vary per person. And it really does depend. Now, some of these kind of specific questions, I am going to always ask people to go back and talk with your doctor. You can do a Dr. Google and look at some general recommendations, but things are going to be very specific. It really varies on how many you're going to get. Okay, now that said, I'm going to do a quick ballpark. Ballparking for a woman, you might want to try to get in maybe about a good 20 grams on your large meals. So if you have 2 large meals, you're getting 40 there, maybe about 10 or so per snack. I try to get a minimum of 60 in per day, but it will depend. And you can do a Google and look at that data. However, my recommendation as a health coach and a health educator is that you always check for your doctor on that, especially when people get into specific things like that. Let's look at a couple of others. Chickpeas. Chickpeas are in hummus. When I make a salad, I'll throw a couple of chickpeas on that. It adds a little bit of texture, a little bit of flavor, but I'm doing that also to get some additional protein. Y'all pop into the comments. What are some of the other things that you see here that have, significant amounts of protein that you didn't think about? Y'all look at black eyed peas. Look at black eyed peas. Almonds have a significant amount of protein as well, but they also come packaged with a good bit of fat. So you want to keep that in mind as well. But as we look at this, look at 13 grams of edamame. Seitan, which is something that a lot of, is Seitan. It is made from wheat gluten. So if you happen to have wheat intolerances, you don't necessarily want to do that. That is a huge source of protein. Oftentimes people will do hazelnuts is another good one. Some people will do tofu. You want to watch that because of the if you have any estrogen sensitivities and things like that, but tofu is going to be a number as well. Y'all look at even the fact that there is protein in a potato. So a lot of times when people say, oh no, well, I can't eat more plant-based because I won't get enough protein, we don't realize that there are other things. And when you're building a well-rounded plate, a nice, good vegetable bowl, starting off with some quinoa at the bottom of that, or you can put some freekeh. That's another good grain in there. Even rice has some protein in it. And you start to add in other legumes and vegetables, you can get to a very protein-rich meal, but it's also not going to have as much saturated fat, and it's going to have the antioxidants and all of those other minerals and benefits that you would like to have as well.
Hey, Nettye,
Okay.
so I've never heard of spirulina. Is that what that is? What is that? What would you normally eat that with?
So I typically see spirulina. If you notice they're showing it as a powder. I notice most often see that in smoothies. And that's where I typically see it. Or have you ever seen people to do not just a drink smoothie, but a smoothie bowl? You kind of add it in. You can actually put it in as like a powder in baking as well. Um, and that's a good use for it, because then the taste of spirulina is not my favorite. It has a you can tell it's very earthy. You can, so I would put it in something, and you can do that. That's a great you bring up a good point. When there's some ingredients that you're not necessarily as familiar with, instead of making it the main item, add it into something. When I make brownies for my children, I put chickpeas in it. They don't even notice it, but they're getting some protein, and I can replace some of the other things. You see what I'm saying? You can add things in. I put zucchini into my baked goods very often to get that moisture instead of using as much butter or oil. So take these kind of elements and just use them as throw-ins. Same thing with like hemp seed. Does that kind of help, Spirulina?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Any other questions about that one? Okay, so let's take a look at a couple of examples, y'all. Halima, lentil chili and sloppy joes are great. You are so right. I think in the cookbook, my cookbook is at the EBR Public Library, and I hope I'm not mistaken. I'm going to look it up. If I didn't include it in there, if you all, if you do the survey, I'm going to send you a bonus recipe list. I'll include the lentil sloppy joe recipe in there. I think it's in the cookbook, but if not, I'll send it to you. Lentils are a phenomenal substitute for ground beef. And they're so inexpensive. A lot of times we hear people say, well, eating healthy is so expensive. If you look at how much a pound of ground beef costs, even if you're getting the 70, 80% that has a ton of fat, right, in it, and you compare that to how much a pound of beans costs or a pound of lentils, and those lentils or beans are going to stretch so incredibly much further. I think that sometimes these things that we think are actually limiting beliefs that have been created just because we're so used to what we're used to. And it's just a matter of making some of those switches. So yes, that's a great one. The Oreos aren't cutting it. Now take a look at this picture. Now tell me in the comments, give me a why if you think that looks good. This is a typical breakfast. As a matter of fact, I had a somewhat a version of that today. Does that look good to y'all? This is a veganish breakfast. I don't see any yeses. I was about to say, y'all don't like this? Okay.
Yes.
So notice what typically, now prior to the shift that I made, when I was always struggling and that kind of sort of thing, usually I would have eggs, I would have bacon, and if I had worked out, sometimes I would have sausage. Usually I'd do either or, but think about it. How many times do we have like two meats now? And when we're doing the bacon or sausage, typically it has been cured. So there's a ton of sodium in there. And sometimes, unless you're buying a specific version that does not have nitrites and nitrates in there, that's the government, they've told us we need to pull off of that because of its links to cancer. So, right. So we would usually have that. We'd have our protein with our eggs. I would usually have grits, and then I would have a biscuit. That sounds like a normal breakfast, right? Yeah, right. So notice the shifts here. This is not vegan, this is veganish because those are eggs, but notice the switch here. Eggs, the yolk has the bulk of the fat, and the white is primarily protein. So here's a veganish shift. I'm going to have egg, but again, trying to keep it a healthy veganish. Instead of eating like 3 eggs, I have 1 whole egg and 3 egg whites. You're getting protein. I believe it's about 4 grams in each one of those egg whites. So I'm getting pretty much almost all the protein that I need right then and there in my egg and egg white mash. And if you notice, I sprinkled a little bit of cheese across the top just because cheese is just good like that. On the other side, instead of having sausage, because we would think that I need to have it for my protein, I'm already well to my protein, allotment that I'm trying to get with the eggs. But notice I'm putting mushrooms and spinach. They both have protein in them as well. I saute those up. Or sometimes I'll roast them on the weekend, but a quick saute in a tiny bit of olive oil. Sometimes I'll put some onion in there, a little bit of red pepper flakes, or put a little bit of garlic. It takes less than 5 minutes to do. And then that piece of bread there, I believe that one is an Ezekiel bread, which is a high protein bread that is made with natural ingredients. You can do Dave's Killer bread as well, and replacing that from a biscuit that usually has lard or a lot of fat and that kinds of things and very refined sugars. This is a very nutrient-rich meal. And then for the sweetness, instead of jelly, which is basically sugar, there's a drizzle of molasses, which is more natural, and I believe has more flavor than a flavored sugar. Do you see how it's just the mindset of veganish is to say plants forward. And if I divide this plate up, most of the plate is plant based. It's grains, like whole grains, because I'm going to get a really good whole grain bread. It's mushrooms, it's spinach, and then there's a smaller portion of egg. Do you see how we did that versus the other way? All right, let me know. Y'all see what we're doing? In your handout, there is a sheet where we ask you to kind of then take a look at how might I make a meal that I typically do just a little bit more veganish. Swap something out, making sure that you're getting, you could eat Nutella instead of jelly. Nutella is yum. It is yum. It does have a good bit of sugar in it, but it's better than jelly. I will give you that. Definitely. Definitely. So there is a space in your handout for you to go on ahead and to just try to think about how you might want to make some substitutes. And if you all have any questions or anything like that, please do let me know and I'll try to grab those in. I'm going to hold these up really quickly so that we have time for questions. Here's some challenges, y'all, when you're taking out of your meat out totally. And this is for people that are going totally vegan, okay? There has been a great, when you go plant-based totally, your heart health goes better, but there are some studies that are showing an increase in stroke risk. And usually those two are combined. So they're doing more research to look into that. They want more longitudinal studies, studies with more individuals in that, but that's something to take a look at. Hair loss is another thing that can happen. And sometimes that's because in the beginning, you're not getting enough protein. I experienced that when I went plant-based. I was like, hold up, wait, my hair, no, and I had to make some adjustments there. There are sometimes mood issues that can happen, and it's not just because you want a hamburger and you're mad because you're not eating it. There are some of those that when people are making transitions, and it's just, again, looking at what you're eating and making sure that your body's getting what it needs. And then BAM is what I call by any means necessary vegan practices. That's where we're buying substitutes just because of the front of the package says it's vegan, and on the backside, it is a chemical experiment. Here is an example. I wanted to show you all, this is the nutrition information for that Impossible Burger versus ground beef. And look at the amount of saturated fat, the amount of total fat, and y'all, that is almost more sodium than you should have in an entire day. But it is advertised to be healthier, but not so much. So it's really important to look at those kind of sort of things. And I recommend starting with more natural ingredients. Let's see, somebody on an iPhone just said they saw a meatless meatball recipe that starts with ground mushrooms and added some breadcrumbs. That would be absolutely delicious. In my cookbook, I have a recipe for a ground beef substitute. You can use lentils alone, but this one, I copied it off of this restaurant. I was in Nebraska. And it is, you take mushrooms, you take walnuts, and I add in cauliflower, and you pulse it up in like a food processor, and it's going to crumble. And then you just kind of heat that up, and it makes like, it's going to look like a ground crumble. And then if you want to do tacos with it, then you would add in taco seasonings, and you can use that. It is amazing, and it's just mushrooms. Of course, I add in things like I'll put in some sun-dried tomatoes, things like that to kind of do it. But you can take those elements and use those instead of ground beef. So that might be a benefit for you as well. Anybody having any aha moments? Anybody having any aha moments about not only that I could do this, but should I do this? Any aha moments happening? Yes, you can grind those things together. So as we get ready to close, as we're coming up on time, and I'm just going to open up and go straight into the questions, is if you're considering adding more vegetables in, which you all said, here's the thing, start with your why. The reason why, first of all, is that a strong why helps us to get past the why nots and the barriers and those kinds of things. Never underestimate the power of a why from a meaningful why from a motivational standpoint. But when it comes to this too, your why will also dictate your how. If I am doing it because I am concerned about the environment and animal rights, I'm going to be more stringent, right? There's a whole lot more that's going to be involved to help to be true to that why. If I'm doing it because I don't mind still eating meat every once in a while, but I want to get more plants in my diet, then that's going to dictate how you do it. Do you see what I mean? Like your why, your reason for doing it will dictate where you're going to go on that spectrum. And I believe that someone said about different blood types and things like that. I always recommend when you're making big changes to your diet, like huge changes, please don't do it in a vacuum. Loop in your health professional, a registered dietitian, and to look at those things. That's if you're going extreme. But small changes here and there that are taking us towards general guidelines, those you can feel more confident in doing. Knowing why you're doing it will be helpful. The second thing is to change your view of meat. Move it from being the star of the plate, like it is the end all to be all, to say, let the meat be a supporting player. Here's some other examples of things that I have done to help my family to become more plant-based because they weren't feeling it. I made an abrupt switch. It was abrupt. I did a Daniel fast. I fast periodically, and I did a Daniel fast for spiritual reasons totally. And I felt so different afterwards. And the taste of meat, I didn't want it anymore. And so for me, it was abrupt. And then I was so excited, and I came to my family, and they were like, yeah, we're not feeling this. They were like, we still want it. And this was maybe, 6, 7 years ago. But what I started to do, and they're veganish, but they still eat meat, is that I just started reducing the amount of meat. Even if I'm doing something like making a jambalaya, if in the past I would put 2 pounds of meat, I started putting in 1.5 pounds. Then I started putting in 1 pound. Then I started putting in just 3/4. And then I started adding in vegetables that didn't distort the flavor for them. And so now they're having a more bountiful, or more healthy version, but they're still having that taste. When I make lasagna, when I make Mexican casseroles and things like that, I will add in some vegetables in addition to the amount of meat that I put in with them, so that the meat is getting closer to that smaller portion that they need, but they're still having the things that they enjoy. Okay, so changing the view. And then the last one would be trying to go meatless one day a week. Y'all, there is a website called Meatless Mondays that is recommending that people just try it. Just try it and see how your body can respond. If your tastes respond, there are a lot of resources in addition to the cookbook, things that can help you. Because here's the thing, what we feed grows. So the more that we eat plant-based foods, the more our taste buds will begin to adapt to it, and we'll have more of a desire for it. Okay, I think we're coming up on time. Are there any additional questions? Jessica, I'm going to go on ahead and turn this back over to you. And then I just want to thank our sponsors, and we'll be ready to go. I want to be mindful of the time.
Sure, yeah. It looks like someone is asking do you have a recommendation for preparing vegetables? Steaming them, boiling them in water, saute?
All of those are good. Now, I don't boil mine in water because that will leach them out, but I do steam. One of the things that I do regularly, and y'all, I recommend this even when it's the summertime and it's hot, because I do it once a week. And if you have an air fryer, then this makes it even better. I take vegetables and don't cut your vegetables or wash them until you're about to use them, because when you cut them, we're giving it more surface area that is going to be oxidized, and that's going to speed up the degradation, and they spoil more quickly. But whenever I buy vegetables, I typically on the weekend, I'll go to the farmer's market, and then I come home, I wash it up, and I will cut them up, and I will roast them in the oven with a very small amount of a high smoke point oil, salt and pepper, nothing else. Roasting brings out the innate flavors. It deepens the innate flavors of vegetables. So I have these trays of vegetables that I've cooked, and then I put them in refrigerator dishes, and I leave them in the refrigerator. So during the week, it's easier for me to throw that breakfast together. Or if I want to make an omelet, or if I want to make a sandwich, sometimes I'll take a good, nice piece of whole wheat bread or hoagie bread, and I can take those roasted vegetables and throw them in there. I can take some soup and throw it in there. I can take some rice and throw the vegetables in there. So even when I'm not doing totally plant-based meals, I have these vegetables already cooked that I can then start to just incorporate in whatever I'm making for myself or my family that eats meat. And that's a way that makes it very simple. Steaming is another great option, and it doesn't deepen the flavor, it brightens the flavor. And here's a tip. A lot of times we want to put salt on vegetables, particularly when they're steamed. Try putting a little bit of fresh lemon juice. It's not going to have the sodium, but it's going to pop and brighten that flavor just like salt would. roasting vegetables somehow has a taste or flavor that makes you forget about meat. You're right, Cynthia. What it does is it's actually bringing out a flavor profile called umami, umami. It brings that out of the vegetables that already have that. Umami is that extra flavor that they kind of gave a name to, maybe, 10, 15 years ago, and it is connected to meat. It's kind of like a savory depth of flavor that meat typically has. And you're right, roasting is going to accentuate the umami flavor. You can actually buy umami flavoring in the store. I haven't seen it in Walmart, but I purchased it from, where do I get it? From Trader Joe's. The spice store has it. I bought it on Amazon, and you can use that when you're cooking beans, greens, things like that. And then you won't have to put a pig part in there, and you won't even miss it. It gives you that depth of flavor that oftentimes we associate with meat. Balsamic vinegar is another great one. Yes, it also is umami. Oh, that's a good one. Yes, Kathy, that's bomb. Yes, on roasted vegetables, even on just sliced tomatoes, that's very good. Miss Annette says she never ate cauliflower until her daughter prepared spiced up cauli rice. Cauliflower is like, it is having its moment. It is so versatile. I put cauliflower in my smoothies. You can roast it up and then toss it in some buffalo sauce and have the most slamming, like buffalo. There's so many things that you can do. And here's one that's not so healthy. Sometimes I will coat it in fish fry and then fry it and put it on top of a salad or in like a po'. It's so good. So good. Anything else, y'all?
I have to agree with Annette. She commented that she really appreciates your flexible attitude. And I know that whenever I think of vegan, and anytime I've really heard vegan, or when people bring up the term vegan, it always sounds so inflexible. It's like, no, you cannot eat meat. Oh, and it's almost a deterrent for a lot of people who say, oh, well, what if I eat chicken once a day, or something like that. And so I like the way that you described it as plant forward, focusing to where the plants and the plant-based foods are more in the spotlight, with the meat as a supporting role. That flexible attitude, it makes me want to go pick up some more vegan cookbooks, including yours.
Yes. Well, let me just show you this really quickly. Now, you somebody mentioned the fried cauliflower. Can y'all see this? I don't think you can. Can you see? It's not showing. Can you see that picture there on the front of the cookbook?
If you stop sharing your screen, we might be it will be a lot bigger.
It'll be better. Okay, so let me do that. Let me do the stop share. Okay, so actually, and it's in the cookbook as well. Let me show you this picture. And I appreciate that you say that. As a health coach, my bottom line is to help people to make change. And I think that when you are like hardcore, for some people that works, and for them that works. But for a lot of people, it's not. And it is about finding your fit and being flexible. Okay, can y'all see that? Those are vegetables.
That looks so good.
Those are mushrooms and cauliflower that I fried. Back behind there is a quinoa tabbouleh that I did. So this is what I serve and very much enjoy, instead of like fried fish and potato salad.
And a few people really says it looks like fried oysters.
They do. I have oyster mushrooms in there. So you see the ones that really look like oysters, those are oyster mushrooms. And then there's pieces of cauliflower. I think those are cauliflower. I have portobello mushrooms. And so all of these things are explained in the cookbook that is in your library. Thank you to the EVR library. It talks a lot about farmers market, buying local. This is the farmers market downtown that's in the book. And I even feature Maggie mushroom. They are down at the farmers market all the time. They taught me so much about mushrooms, and I share that information in here with y'all.
So. Yeah. So check out our catalog. Her book, the record is there. We're in processing. We have her books. We're putting the stickers on it and everything. So just keep an eye out. And so as soon as some books are available in our catalog, click reserve, and you'll be able to put them on hold. But yes, we will have her book. We also have her first book as well. So you just go to the catalog and search Nettye Johnson, and you'll find both of those books right there.
And let me just say this. I am so thankful to the public library, because in making that shift, I didn't know where to begin. First of all, I couldn't cook regular. And then I learned how to cook Louisiana, and then making that shift. So I just had all kinds of issues. And although I do have a cookbook collection that is borderline hoarder, and my husband was like, Nettye, you need to pump the brakes on buying cookbooks, I shifted to going to the library all the time. And the selection that y'all have is absolutely amazing. And the thing is, don't let, if you happen to get a book that is hardcore vegan and it has stuff you've never heard of and you're not, don't let that turn you off. Find your fit, find things that this I will try, this I won't, to just make vegetables interesting to you, and then just continue to try them. Because again, the more we eat, what we feed grows, and we can develop, our taste for them will open. Our body will honor that decision to try to eat more healthfully. Y'all, one thing, I'm going to put this, maybe I can put it into the comments. I would again like to thank our other sponsors, which are Healthy BR. If you all are not familiar with Healthy BR, it is the Baton Rouge's Healthy Cities initiative. Please do check them out at healthybr.com, as they have things that they're offering all the time. And then also the other one is the Join All of Us research program, which is designed to advance precision medicine. This whole shift that we're talking about all of these chronic diseases and the like, all of us is just really trying to gather information on individuals so that we can see how researchers can advance medicine and make it precise to individuals. So I recommend that you check those two resources out. And if you all would please complete a survey, everybody that does, I'll send you some additional resources, recipe resources. And to do that, let me see, I'm going to type it in. How do I do this? I need to go to everyone in the meeting. It's in your handout, but it's bit.ly/veganish with a capital V, today's date, 2/3, and then survey. So if y'all would fill that out, it would be greatly appreciated. And I'll send everybody that completes the survey some additional recipe resources. Thank you so much for sharing. And please do be honest, I always want to improve and make these health outreach opportunities as fruitful as possible. And we've had some discussions about doing continued things on different topics ongoing. So we really want to hear from you about what would be some other topics, either different topics or maybe more in depth, even in the same area that you would like to see.
Absolutely. And so as I mentioned in the beginning, this presentation was recorded, and the recording will be available on YouTube, on the library's YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/East Baton Rouge Parish Library. It should be in the email that I sent with this Zoom link. So keep an eye out over the next few days. We'll upload it as soon as we can. So you can share it and you can watch it again. And again, the more that you tell us about these events and what you would like to see in the future, the better we can serve you here at the library, Nettye, everybody. We can try to figure out what we can do to best bring your interests to the forefront and give you more chance to interact with our speakers, who are very, very knowledgeable. And we're very, very fortunate to have such wonderful people such as Nettye to share what they have with our community. So thank you, Nettye.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And thank y'all for being so engaged in the chat. That makes a big difference. And I appreciate it. And I hope you got an idea to try to just put some more plants on your plate.